Alaska Native Women in the Church by Ruth Ritchey-Moore. Alaska is divided into 5 distinct cultural regions. The research I read focused on the Tlingit in southeastern Alaska, the Inupiaq in the far north, and the Aleut in the southwest. Sheldon Jackson was a leader of the missionaries who came to Alaska in hopes of saving the Alaska Natives, transforming them into productive Christian citizens. Along with bringing Christianity to Alaska Natives, Jackson also tried to introduce reindeer husbandry to Alaska. Agriculture was seen as a better way to earn a living than hunting or gathering. Jackson was not very successful in introducing agriculture to Alaska in this way, however. Alaska was divided into regions for each denomination to have a responsibility. The Russian Orthodox had come to Alaska much earlier and were already established, so they are not on this map. The Lutheran Church was also excluded from this dividing of Alaska. My research also mentioned the Presbyterians, who shared space with the Russian Orthodox in southeastern Alaska, and the Methodists, who focused on the Aleutian Islands. The Methodist Church established the Women's Home Missionary Society in 1880. These women were very dedicated to their cause and raised the money they needed to travel to Alaska themselves. Parrish wrote that they believed the nativeness of Alaska Natives needed to be destroyed. As you'll see, this is a common theme among the missionaries to Alaska. Lucy Webb Hayes, who would one day be the First Lady of the United States, was their first president. The goal of this mission was to educate young women so they could raise good Christian families for themselves. This photo shows a young Inupiaq woman with the caption, "A Civilized Alaskan Belle." The missionaries saw their goal as making the Alaska Natives less native and more of what they saw as American. You can see this reflected in the Victorian clothing this young woman is wearing, instead of her traditional clothing. Alaska Native women were only seen as something wrong that needed to change. The Russian Orthodox Church came to the Sitka area in the 1790s. I read 2 articles written by Kahn that focused on women's roles in the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church in Alaska as a whole. The Russian Orthodox Christians soon established many churches. The Russian men married Alaska Native women, and these women who married Russians and joined the church were considered more valuable as people. Again, these women were seen as people who needed to change. Kahn wrote that Christianity was more detrimental to women than men. Previously, an important part of Tlingit tradition was a matrilineal system, with ancestors and spiritual wisdom passed down from the mother's side of the family. Russian Orthodox Christians were patriarchal instead. They didn't see as much value in listening to or learning from women. Soon, Alaska Native men were allowed to become priests. It was only later, when men were more likely to have jobs that kept them away from the church, that women defended the church as their ancestors' church and brought their children and grandchildren to church to continue the tradition. In spite of everything, these women had found a community and a home. In the same area, the Presbyterians came and established a school for Alaska Native children. They were very insistent that children only speak English and abandon any other Alaska Native traditions. Especially among elders, this was not acceptable, and as a result, many more people joined the Russian Orthodox Church, which was more tolerant of Alaska Native traditions and language. Traditionally, the Tlingit have very specific and very complementary gender roles. For example, the men hunt and the women process and prepare the meat so they can feed their families, also preserving food for the winter. Women also pick berries and gather greens and mouse food, collections of roots and nuts stored away by mice. In these pictures, you can see men fishing and a woman processing the fish. Alaska Native women had to navigate the new gender roles imposed on them by the Russian Orthodox Church. In this picture, you can see the wedding bands in a traditional Russian Orthodox wedding. The man's ring is gold, symbolizing the sun, while the woman's is silver, symbolizing the moon. The woman was always supposed to be submissive to her husband, reflecting his thoughts and beliefs rather than sharing her own. In the Russian Orthodox Church, women were not permitted to speak in front of the congregation. Sometimes they were allowed to sing in the choir. They had a special role as a godmother to raise children in the church. Children are given godmothers when they are baptized as babies. The godmother supports the parents as they raise their child. Women could also teach children Sunday school. In small study groups called brotherhoods, women could sometimes attend with their husbands, and they would be allowed to give testimony, such as a time they were very sick, but by the grace of God allowed to recover. Older women also gave advice to young men and women. Alaska Native people traditionally revere the wisdom of elders, whether they are men or women. Historically and today, women have had an important role of providing food for a variety of church functions, including funerals, baptisms, and other ceremonies. Another role women could have was as caretakers of the altar cloths. Altar cloths in a Russian Orthodox church change as the church calendar changes. White cloths, for example, are used during the Easter season to symbolize the cleansing brought by the sacrifice of Jesus. Women were responsible for mending these cloths, along with cleaning them and preparing them for use. These cloths were very special, and caring for them requires ritual cleansing. It was an honor to be given this responsibility. De Haas wrote about Slavic, the name for a Russian Orthodox Christmas season. Starring is one main part of that tradition. The congregation travels to each house in the village, bringing the star to bless each house. The priest, who is a man, leads the ceremony, but young women are also considered an important part of the story. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is a main focus, and one way to show the value of women as mothers and servants of God. Some of the Inupiaq were evangelized by the Lutheran Church. Hansen wrote that the hymns were an easy way for the Lutheran to connect with the Inupiaq. It was considered impressive to be able to translate the English hymns into Inupiaq so the congregation could sing and understand them. Even though traditional Inupiaq spirituality does not focus on individual salvation like these missionary hymns do, the hymns were still sung and quickly became an important part of their faith tradition. Songs that were a favorite of loved ones were sung to remember those people. More recently, women have taken on the role of creating new songs and being more thoughtful about them. For example, one woman I read about said she does not sing the phrase, "whiter than snow," and other phrases that connect being white with goodness. This is one way to fight back against the idea that Alaska Natives need to become more like the missionaries and other people involved in colonialization. Another woman from Shishmirov has written new hymns and added traditional dance to bring the customs together in a new way. Traditionally, hymns were not accompanied by drums because ancient Inupiaq spiritual practices required the shaman to drum in order to bring spirit helpers, and this was not acceptable to missionaries. It may be possible someday to bring these two parts of the tradition together. Church is a place where people go to grieve. In the Russian Orthodox Church, there are feasts to commemorate 40 days after a person dies, along with a feast every year on the anniversary of the person's death. Hansen emphasized that death is always tragic, whether it is a young person who dies of suicide or an elder who can no longer teach others her wisdom. Along with giving family members an opportunity to grieve, it also ensures they will not be alone, but will be surrounded by their community. Women prepare memorial feasts together, supporting each other along the way. Kahn wrote about the responsibility of the brotherhoods to care for the poor and sick in their communities. In a time when more men than women had wage-paying jobs, it was especially important to care for single mothers and elders. Historically and today, people who are struggling with temporary challenges and long-term mental health issues can come to the church for help and support. Although this benefits both men and women, Hamaker's research showed that this support can be most valuable for women who are already affiliated with a faith-based group. It is also often women who are providing the counseling and more informal support. These are the articles I used in my research. Each included interesting perspectives and information. I hope you have seen that women always have and will continue to have an important role in the church.